John Brennan here with MMA Tea Company. Another one of our episodes, a special episode today of our Industry Insider series. I have Charlie, the Spaniard, Brenneman, former UFC fighter, now author, motivational speaker, podcaster, all-around media and content creator. Charlie, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. You summed it up pretty well because if, my wife says, what do you do? People ask me what you do. What do you do? And I like what the last part there, overall media content creator. That's what I do. I live a message and I teach that message, and it comes out in a couple of different ways.
Sure. And I think, the way that things are going now is content can't just be consumed in one way. I have friends who they read books. I have friends who listen to books on audiobook. I have friends who watch podcasts. I have friends who listen to podcasts. The more that you can get your content out in those multiple forms, I think the more successful overall people are who want to create that content.
Yeah, and it's tough, man. Being a solo ship here, and I have a partner who volunteers his time, a huge portion of his life, for the greater good of what we're doing and the future of what we're doing. But it also runs the, like I was just telling you, I'm excited to have a fight conversation because everything the last 2 months especially has been putting this link here, building can be like overdoing it to where you get nowhere in any of them. And at this point we don't have a team, but no one has a team when they're just starting out. So it's, we're just doing what we can where we can.
Sure. And we're in the same boat. It's just, Alex, my co-founder, and me, and I'm using my background that I got going to school for journalism to, edit, upload, create links and get everything to our website, do stuff like that. And he's more of the t-shirt expert. He started a Shopify store for himself for a different brand. And we kind of came together. We met working for a minor league baseball team, kept in touch, and this kind of just worked out, and we're rolling with it.
I tell you what, man, that's a nice marriage because my partner and I are both creator types. We don't have a logistic type or a platform type and then a creator type. So we've gone the long route in learning, the business or the logistics or the back end side of it. But it's, also forced us to learn things that we never otherwise would have learned.
Yeah. And that's, I think, part of, I'm partially through your book now, that's part of your mantra, I think, in everything that you're doing is you're still learning, every day. And, part of this content creation is you're learning, this side of things.
It is. And, a big picture of that, and it's certainly relevant in fighting is I've never met anyone who's made it, right? Who's just sits and rests in their laurels and clouds and connects money. And even the richest, most successful people in the world, the best in the world, like if they stay that way, it's the day in and day out push of keeping it that way. So it is it's a continuous learning. And as soon as we get to a platform, just like getting to the UFC, as soon as you get to the UFC, well, guess what? Now you're around only killers and they want to smash you. So you've got to step up from there. So there's just levels and levels and levels.
And, I want to start with your fighting career back when you're in college and, you're at Lock Haven, you're wrestling and, you graduate. When do you make the decision to, start training MMA, think that fighting is something that you could do?
So there's a couple things in play prior to any of that. Mike Cisnelevich, who fought in the UFC, fought in the
Mike and I went to the same high school, by the way.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so when I was wrestling, he was a little bit older, but he was in this thing. And I was like, wait, so it's like wrestling except you're punching and kicking each other? And it was so crazy. I was freshman, sophomore probably. I was thinking to myself, it's the craziest thing in the world. And then him and Tim Bosch were good friends and we were the same time. And Bosch got involved in it. I still never thought, and this was when Tim was probably sophomore, junior, 2000, I don't know, 2, 3. I'm guessing that he started dabbling in it. Mike went out to Militich and I was like, what's Militich? I had no idea, none of this stuff. And that's, I'm 22 years old, 21 years old at that time. And then at that time it was just, I know these guys. And it was never anything of, hey, I might do that. And then I have a distinct memory of watching Couture and Vitor Belfort fight. I was at my college house, and it was one where he cut him. Like he like glanced his eye and cut his eyelid, and they canceled it. I remember we had gotten a pay-per-view to watch that, and still at that time, never in a zillion years did I think I was going to do it. And then wrestling ended, college ended, and then I was teaching and thought, I'm so done with that lifestyle, that like hard-nosed wrestling. I'm just, never want to make weight, don't want to get up early, don't want to sprints. And then I got like fat and happy, and then I got like fat and unhappy, and I thought, I don't want to do this. Like I want something. And then I saw Frankie Edgar, again, a fellow EWL wrestler, and I was like, holy cow, man, like all these guys are doing that, especially Frankie, because I for whatever reason, it was a different time in my life. And so I saw him, connected to him, and thought, man, if he can do it, I can do it. And then, obviously he's had like incredible success, but he was like the basically decision for me to say, hey, I'm going to do that. And that was 2005 ish.
Okay. And then, right, you see Frankie, you make that decision. What's your next step? It's a lot different in 2005 than it is now in 2020 to just go online, Google jiu-jitsu or MMA near me and walk into a gym.
Yeah. So at that time, 2005 in my area, and I'm from Blair County, Pennsylvania, and there was a few gyms. There was a jiu-jitsu gym, like literally in my town or the neighboring town. And so I went there, and how I found them, I trained at a place called The Summit, and Alan, the owner of that, I probably saw him there, and my buddy from college knew this guy, and it was just like, we knew what it was. And then as soon as I thought like, hey, I want to do it, I knew enough of what it was to know where a guy was. And then from Alan's gym, I went up to about 45 minutes away and joined a gym up there. It was mainly a Muay Thai gym, but they had a budding mixed martial arts program. And so I would drive up there. It's about 50 minutes. I would drive up there a couple nights after work. I was a Spanish teacher at that time. I remember I got my feet wet, and I literally knew nothing. I was scared to death of fighting, just like, it's like drunk fighting and bar fighting and street fighting. It just made me sick, and it makes me sick to my stomach now, especially with a family. And, but this was like a new way of looking at it. It was like a skill set. It was respectable. It was a way for me to get back to that lifestyle that I missed. And so I started going up to Cameron Martial Arts on a regular basis, and then just started to keep my eyes and ears open and found some fights. At that time, it was not sanctioned in Pennsylvania. And, that'll be a part of the story to when it did get sanctioned, but just kept my eyes and ears open. And Eddie Alvarez actually came to the gym in near my hometown, Hollidaysburg, very early in my exposure to this sport called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts. And that was when he was fighting for Bodog. And I remember talking to him about his contracts and the money he was making, which was an anomaly back then, because he was making a lot of money back then when no one else was making a lot of money. Like, he's a very smart guy. And so, I had Frankie as like an initial kind of guide pole, like I want to get there. And then Eddie came, totally unrelated. And I was like, whoa, this is like a real touchable, tangible person. And I was still a junior high Spanish teacher. And so I just clinged to Eddie and I said, hey, I want to learn. And it's not hard. There's a lot of, not just young fighters, but people in general who say, hey, I want to start a t-shirt company. Tell me how to do it. Mm-hmm. And my like process for that is give them level one step. Okay. In my case, find a local gym, go there for 6 months. And then in 6 months, message me and we'll take the next step. Nobody ever does it because it's too hard or whatever, but it's not hard to show someone that you really want it, because you do want it and you do it. And I think he was probably able to see that. And plus I invited myself to his gym. Like, can I come train, please? Can I come train? And everyone at Fight Factory back then is where he was training in Philly. I just started opening new doors. And then when I went to grad school, I left my job. I reached back out to Frankie, said, hey, I'm in Eastern PA. You're in New Jersey. Can I come train with you? At that time, Nick Catone Martial Arts, Mark Henry, mm-hmm. Ricardo Almeida, like Frankie was not connected. That hadn't started yet. So I was just a body who knew how to wrestle. And he was like, heck yeah. And so I started training with him and a guy named Chris Ligori. And those two were like huge in my development. And it was literally just putting the pieces together step by step.
And you said something that uh, I say a lot to people who come into the gym and they're, I'm teaching a kickboxing class or a jiu-jitsu class, and they say, they're 6 months in and they say, how do I get better faster? Or how do I, they're looking for a cheat code or a quick way to the top. And my advice to them is always asking them a question first. How many days a week are you training? 2. Okay, well, start training 4 and talk to me in 6 months, and I feel like you'll be much better. And I think that kind of mentality, a lot of people don't want to put in that dirty work of just showing up, grinding every day, realizing that this is not a sprint, right? You can't sprint to the top of being a good fighter.
Yeah. I mean, it was my life, period.
Yeah, exactly.
There was nothing else that mattered. Nothing. I gave up. I don't want to say I gave up everything, but I mean, I literally left my job and moved out of security into insecurity. And it was the only thing I cared about. The only thing I did. I lived and breathed. Like now I live and breathe by my show, and reaching people in a different way. Then lived and breathed by training. Ligori, who actually fought in the UFC way back, he made a joke. Like we were somewhere and they were sparring, and it was like an impromptu. And I was like, yeah, my stuff's in my car. And it was like not planned at all. And I remember him making a comment was like, that's when, like you're ready, when you're everything is there. You're basically wearing your training outfit, and it was my life focus. And that's how you get better. You make it your life focus, or wherever that scale is for you, but that's going to directly affect how good you get.
Oh, I 100% agree. I mean, I see people all the time who do drop everything and go into it, and they pass me quickly, right? They, especially, when they have the tools and the ability that goes along with that mentality, you can get really good if you drop everything and dive right in. And when you did that, right, how long from the time that you said, all right, this is what I'm going to dedicate myself to, having your, I don't want to say first fight, but your first fight, how long was that?
So I was probably premature because I wrestled. So, I had a whole life of wrestling. My first amateur fight, I mean, it was a fight, but I didn't really know how to fight. I was wrestling. It was we were talking earlier, but I mean, it was in Steubenville, Ohio, organization called Next Level Fights. And, boy, talk about like fighting environments. I mean, this was it was like almost like an amphitheater type environment. It was an arena. There was alcohol. People just wanted blood. And I was a junior high Spanish teacher. And it was like, this is the craziest thing ever. It was literally like a movie. And so I started premature, probably just because I had that competitive, like you wrestle your whole life, you're qualified to do a lot of things. But I had to learn kind of the back end of it, or I had to learn the sport after I had already started fighting. But being a diligent student in anything, I mean, we were talking about that question before this. I speak Spanish. If you want to learn a language, immersion, go to that country, period. That's 100% immersion. So it's that way with anything. And, I did that with fighting, and I'm trying to think. So I was on Pros versus Joes 05, 06. And then I think my first amateur fight was fall of 06. And then my first professional fight was summer of 07. So it was like, learn that this thing exists, probably like 05. First, like late 05. First fight is 06. And then, or a couple months later, really. So I fought a couple months after I was training. And then that next summer was my first professional fight. And it was not planned out at all. I mean, it was just like, it was just, it's here. I can do it. Yeah, I can compete. Sure. And then they just kind of do it.
So you had that fight. You said you were in Ohio for your first amateur fight. How many amateur fights did you have in that time span between amateurs, pro versus Joe, and then making that pro debut?
So let me think this out loud. So my first amateur fight was basically Thanksgiving of 06. And then from Thanksgiving of 06 to, I believe it was July of 07, I had 5 amateur fights. 2 of them were in one night. So there were 4 events, from November '06 to prior to July '07. So it was every couple of months.
And the rule sets of those amateur fights at that time. I know now in Pennsylvania, amateurs, just 2-minute rounds, no head kicks, no ground and pound to the head, wear shin guards. What were the rules like then?
I'm pretty sure, and it differed from state to state. So in New Jersey, which is where I fought, I think I had three of my amateur fights were in Jersey, at least 3. And that was no strikes to the face on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And the one I fought 2 times in one night, that was at a Boys and Girls Club in Newark. And that we had shin pads and the kind of combat training gloves.
Mm-hmm.
And in Steubenville, I'm trying to think where my 5th amateur fight was, but in Steubenville, it wasn't professional rules, but it was not far from professional rules. I feel like maybe you couldn't elbow. Maybe that was the only whatever, but it was much more strict in New Jersey. So basically it was an influx of fighting, and then it was getting popular, and then they were kind of reeling it back to make it safer. So I was in that in between where the amateur rules of no striking to the face happened, like, I feel like right after I was done and or during my amateur career, which was 06-ish.
Gotcha. And then, you make your pro debut. Where did you make that debut at? And with what promotion was it?
Who knew the guy that I initially started training with. And it was my buddy Carlos, who I knew from college wrestling. And we just went to the weigh-ins. We didn't know anything about anything. And I remember it was in West Orange, New Jersey. What was it called? Extreme Fight Challenge or something like that. And I fought a black belt named Marcelo Oliveira, which with your first fighting a black belt, it's like, I don't know if that's the smartest fight in the world to take or not, but I don't even know if I knew him, to be honest. It was just, I remember going there, weighing in, didn't know where I was or anything with Carlos and Bill. And then I remember I got to the arena, it was in West Orange, and I saw Frankie there, and I knew Frankie from, training and stuff. Nearly certain him and Chris were in my corner, and he was just kind of guiding me through it. Cause I remember I was all real, like, nervous about, like, no, but we're supposed to be here at this time. I'm supposed to have this. And he was like, just relax a little bit. So I just kind of followed his lead, and I ended up fighting that fight in, I believe it was July of 07, beat, I believe it was Marcelo Oliveira. And then I think it was my next 3 fights, I think, were in the Ring of Combat Beast of the Northeast tournament, which was like, I think it was July, and then September, October, November were those 3 fights in a row. And I remember for the Oliveira fight, this is really fun, and this is hitting me at a good time because I was telling you, it's just really stressful outside of this. But the Oliveira fight, I think I made $400 to fight, and then I got an additional $300 to win.
So they didn't even double it.
No, it was 400 and 300. But I was like the richest dude in the world because I had a $700 cash. I was also a junior high Spanish teacher at this time, so it was.
You were still teaching, okay?
Yeah, it was all kind of just icing on the cake. And then for the Ring of Combat tournament, I got in the Ring of Combat tournament. The Beast of the Northeast, he has a not very fighter friendly way of paying fighters. And it was all ticket sales. Like, here's $1,500 of tickets. If you don't sell any, you don't get paid any. If you sell them all, you get paid $1,500. So I think my purses for that, it was a 3-fight tournament. I think I got $1,000 in tickets the first time. I feel like I made about $1,500 the second one, and I made $14,300 the third one.
Oh wow! So
in my 4th professional fight, I made more than $14,000. And that was a deal that you could either do, like, it was something like 10,000 to win, 2,500 bonus, or like 10,000 plus the potential to make more with ticket sales. And I took that option. So that was kind of the behind the scenes of that. And then that tournament, Ring of Combat in Atlantic City at the Trop, was when I'm actually wearing a Spaniard Nation sweatshirt right now. But that's when like the Spaniard shirt, which was a thing with my fans and community, that's where that started. Because Eddie had told me, like, basically, if you don't promote yourself, nobody's going to promote you. So you've got to promote yourself. So then I was like, all right, well, I'll make a fight t-shirt. And so my brother and I put one together, and at the Trop, you know, we sold them to everyone back home, and, you know, everyone was wearing this royal blue Spaniard shirt. And was like, who's a Spaniard? Who's a Spaniard? And it was like, we're just pretending we belonged.
And you mentioned something that I think a lot of people don't realize about regional MMA fighting is how much ticket sales play into what a, you know, 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, so on pro fighter actually gets paid. When you're selling your tickets early on, how many are you selling, and how are you keeping track of that money coming in, money going out?
Yeah, this is, you know, really valuable stuff to know. I'm not in agreement with the way that is put on the fighter. Like, a fighter is supposed to fight. A fighter is not supposed to promote your tournament or your, like, we fight. You pay us to fight. You do the marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not us.
Yep.
But that's the way it is. I've had friends who lost money.
So have I. Yeah, I've seen it happen.
Like, well-known regional promotions, they're losing money because they don't sell enough tickets. Like, there's a ticket guarantee. You've got to sell X tickets or you eat it. And they're like, they eat it and they lose money to fight. But when I started, I think because of my community, my wrestling background, I was teaching at my alma mater, Hollidaysburg. There was enough interest in, like, I was on a reality show also when I was teaching, Pros versus Joes. So there was enough, like, kind of steam and energy around me that people were curious. And so I got a handful, you know, for those fights down in AC, and that's a 5-hour plus trip from Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. So it's a trek. Plus you got to stay in the hotel. It's a $500 weekend, you know. But I would probably get between Hollidaysburg and grad school in East Stroudsburg, I don't know, 25 to 75 people at those fights I would sell. And then I don't know exactly when, but once it started to get legalized in Pennsylvania, then it became like I would sell, I think the most was around 500 tickets.
Cool.
And that took like a lot of organization. So at first I was just doing it. And then my brother and I were doing it. And then for those fights, the Valley Fight League that took place in Altoona, PA, which is where I think it was 468, I think was the number of tickets I sold. But I mean, we would have like $15,000 of cash in our living room. And my dad, my sister, my brother, and I are like, you know, like divvying it out. We feel like drug kingpins. We're divvying it out. And, you know, meeting people. Like, literally, I'm trying to fight on tomorrow or whatever. I'm saying, yeah, hey, and this is everyone who's listening to this does it, right? Like, hey, you want to meet at Sheetz, or you want to meet across the street from Burger King, and I'll give you your pub. And then you get people who just never do it, and you're like, son of a gun. That's like, you have all these stresses. That's why I totally am not a fan of fighters like having to sell tickets. But eventually my brother kind of stepped in as my manager, and he assumed a lot of that burden. And so like he and my brother and my sister, especially for those home fights, really, you know, stepped in. So I didn't have to worry that much about it.
Yeah, I sympathize with you 100%. I couldn't get through my head why this is such a difficult process as I started fighting. You know, I go to have my first couple amateur fights, and I don't think the general public understands how much actually goes into a fight mentally, especially on the week that you're cutting weight, which is when most people want to get those tickets.
Yeah.
And for me, I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this, because I'm selling shirts too, right? And I'm selling tickets, and I'm trying to do package deals and, you know, getting sponsorship,
money.
all those things. Yeah. And that was kind of where the idea for our company came from in the first place. I mean, I just looked at my system and said, there has to be a way to automate this. And, you know, hopefully we can, you know, help ease the burden on a lot of those regional fighters, because it is a full-time job in and of itself, promoting yourself, and then you have to go fight.
Yeah. And I don't know exactly how your company works, but, you know, even promotions have gotten better. Like, go to the website, put in the fighter name, code, and then whatever, they get credit. But it's still like, people don't want to do anything, like nothing. Like, you don't want me to just make your meal for you. You want me to make your meal and then spoon feed you your meal.
Mhm.
So they're not, if they're going to that site, they're not putting the code in and it doesn't work. But then like the helpful side, it's the same with books. Like I sell books. Amazon does everything, but they also take, I don't know, 50 or 60, 40 to 60% of the money that I make.
Mhm.
So it's like a balance. And like I said, I don't know exactly how your company works, but to me, it's like, yeah, I buy books that I have in my closet in case I do a live show, but otherwise I don't want anything to do with it. So yes, Amazon, take your money and produce it, take my money and produce it as is, because it's worth it. And when you're fighting like that, I mean, every dollar is super important when you're early in fighting, but there comes a point where it's like, all right, what's worth more, this $100 or this many units of peace?
Mhm.
And if you want to win your fight, that peace becomes really, really valuable.
Yeah, and just so I'll give you a 1 minute rundown of our company. Essentially, we have a store for a fighter. So it's MMATcompany.com/collection/ whatever their name is. Any of their fans can go right to their store. It has all their custom designs. They go in, they click purchase, ships direct to garment right to the person who purchased it. And then the fighter takes a percentage of every sale. And we always pay our fighters out, 60 to 65 to 70% of the sales. The rest just goes back into building the business and keeping the website running. Um,
And is that shirt you have on right now one of your shirts?
no, this is actually my local bike shop that I have to take my bike to after this, and I wanted to show them some love on the show today. They just
I was
opened.
going to say that's a sweet shirt. I was
Oh yeah,
going to
you
say
can get
like,
one. Check out Hush Money Bikes on Instagram. They're
yeah,
blowing up.
both the texture of the shirt, but also kind of the sheen of the shirt looks really nice.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a Bella canvas, in case you're wondering.
Yeah,
um,
nice.
But yeah, so that's how it works. And we've had some success early on. We have about 20 fighters that we sponsor now, and we're starting to do more, media opportunities, interviews, kind of like this. We're going to be doing things that we're at their fights, taking highlights, interviewing them there. Sending
Yeah,
reporters out. The whole nine.
and that's all print on demand.
All print on demand. We do so once they have a fight coming up, we switch to a pre-sale order, and all of the orders for their T-shirts within a 4-week period will get put into a wholesale order. We'll place that order in bulk. Their margins will double, and then we'll package and ship them individually ourselves.
Yeah, and then how many designs do most guys have?
Some have 3 to 4. We do all the designs in house, so they can bring a design with them, or they can give us an idea. My co-founder Alex is a graphic designer that he kind of had to learn on his own. When I left the baseball team doing my the
Mm-hmm.
job that I was doing, he got pushed into that position and had to learn Photoshop. And ever since
Yeah,
then, he's been doing graphic design. So they come to him with an idea. He'll design them 3, 4 shirts if they want it, and then they can be up there for ever, really.
yeah, that's cool, man.
Appreciate it. But getting back into fighting, so I want to talk about when Pennsylvania actually sanctioned MMA, because that was a big deal in the state. Because at the time, Pennsylvania was a wrestling and a boxing state, and now here comes this little brother MMA that's gaining some speed or steam and some traction coming up through. What was that like for you, being a PA kid and being able to fight in your hometown or close to it?
Yeah, it opened up a whole new, like a whole new world pretty much. And I'm trying to think in the chronological order. I lost to John Howard. That was my first loss. And I want to say I was either 6-0 when I lost to him or 5-0 when I lost to him. Well, let's say I was 6-0. So that put me at 6-1, right around there. I think like right after that, and that was 2008, maybe 2007, 2008, had to be 8. I feel like right around then is when it became sanctioned in Pennsylvania. So either my next fight right after him, and I could be off, but I'm pretty sure this is pretty accurate. Either my next fight after him or like the soon after him is when it was sanctioned in Pennsylvania. And it was honestly, it was like a whole new ball game. And at that time, so I left my teaching job in 2007 to pursue fighting. And I got my master's degree in the interim. And then my master's I don't even know what it's called, but where you have to do the work, like the
Mhm.
outside work for your degree. That was at Matt Hughes's gym, the Hit Squad in Evanston, Illinois.
That's
So like
awesome.
I did some like gym stuff, but I was training with
Mhm.
him and Robbie Lawler and all these killers. So it was like, it was awesome. And then when it became, sanctioned in Pennsylvania, it was, I don't know where my first fight in PA was, but then it became my trainers, the guys who ran Cameron Martial Arts Academy. They started a promotion. It was in Johnstown, PA. And I want to say they even had one down in Altoona, PA, which again are literally my backyard or 40 minutes from where I grew up. And so, it was a promotion that showcased our fighters. Like we had a local place to fight. So it was super helpful. The Valley Fight League, which I mentioned, Lionel, who was the promoter of that, he saw my potential. He wasn't in my area, but then he started coming to my area. There's it's called the Jaffa Mosque. It's like a Shriner building in Altoona, PA. Back in the day, my older siblings and cousins went to see the WWF used to go there. And I want to say they saw Andre the Giant there. There were some big names there. But so he's between the fights with Iron Will Fighting, which was my gym's promotion, and the Valley Fight League, I was able to get, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 fights pretty quickly, making pretty good money. Like a flat fee of 4,000 or 5,000, and then plus ticket sales, or a flat fee of 2,500 plus ticket sales, which would put me to 5,000. So it was a pretty nice situation.
Mhm.
There's also a bunch of pressure when you fight in front of your home crowd, like a lot of pressure to win. And it was like, it was awesome, but at the same time, it was really stressful. But I was able to win and secure myself and secure progressing forward while living in Eastern PA in East Stroudsburg, while training at AMA Fight Club, then driving back home for the fights, then driving back to Eastern PA to train. Just because I was able to train with guys like the Miller brothers and Frankie and Chris and Ricardo Almeida and Henzo Gracie, and a whole world of training over there.
And you mentioned, the pressure that comes with fighting in front of your hometown. I had the chance to fight here in Lancaster, and sold 100 tickets and made my pro debut and lost. And I still felt almost the obligation to go see all of these people and go talk to them, and they almost thought that I wouldn't come out and see everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have that same kind of feeling of paying it back to those people that came out to see you when they would be in the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, that's my whole, it's just what my parents taught me is just, integrity and gratitude. And, it really started when I was growing up wrestling, because people were so supportive. And when you try your heart, it's the same thing I'm doing with my show. Today was my 1,000th consecutive episode of my daily episodes on my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's kind of insane, but if you wrestle and you fight and you know what it takes, and it's really like, no, it's just part of the day. You just do it. And when people see you put yourself into something, it's inspiring, period. Like they just want to help you. So you probably got more love from losing than you would have for winning, because people don't want to see you hurt. Like they love you. They want to support you. They feel it's like hosting a live stream or something when no one shows up, or a Zoom and no one shows up. They just want to help you. Like nobody wants to feel like that. They want to help you. And I always was grateful and respectful. And I still feel compelled to answer every single comment on all of my social media, because the last thing I want is for someone to say, yeah, he's an a-hole. That guy's a jerk. And so I would have after parties and pre-parties and whatevers, knowing it's a big risk tonight. Like I better win.
Yep.
I remember my first fight after getting released from the UFC, my first time. I fought a guy named Eric Irvin, and his teammate ended up getting signed to the UFC not too long after. He was like a young stud. I think he was 6-2 at the time, but he wanted me. Like he wanted me. And like, those are dangerous fights to take when someone doesn't care about you at all. They just want you. They want to knock you off. And I was sick, like 2 days before I just started getting sick, and it was like a respiratory. And I was in my head, I was like, and my dad was commenting on it, and I was like, don't say it out loud, Dad. and I couldn't breathe real well. And I was thinking this is not going to be fun at all. And I ended up choking him out, I think, in the second round. But that especially is one that sticks out. And then I fought a guy named Mitch Weitzel, who was a 500 fighter from Ohio, part of the kind of Ohio contingent. NAAFS was an organization back then. And he beat me up physically more than anyone's ever beat me up. And he cut me over my eye. I have a scar over my eye now. And the ref probably should have stopped it. The doctor didn't stop it. My buddy was like, yeah, he's fine. We didn't have a blood kit. We didn't know how to stop blood at all. Like, there was nothing. We're like, all right, what do we do now? But he hit me. He was on bottom, hit me with an elbow, and totally exploded my eye. And, thankfully, I kept fighting and I won the fight. But those are all like, you can't guarantee that you're going to win.
No, and you can't even guarantee you're going to be there after the fight. Sometimes you got to go right to the hospital.
Or you can't even guarantee that you're going to fight. I was scheduled to fight in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. Forget the promotion up the top of my head, but he's a common – actually, in your Mark. He's in your area, in Lancaster area. Name slipped me right now. Anyway, I was scheduled to fight. I was at East Stroudsburg grad school. This was at one of the resorts 20 minutes away from campus. And my opponent – this was day of weigh-ins at this time. That was another thing that changed. Like, it used to be day of weigh-ins for professional fights.
For everybody. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I would weigh in at 8 a.m. and then fight later that night at whatever o'clock. But my opponent failed his eye exam after weigh-ins. So the fight was called off. And so I had to return like 100 tickets and call everybody. And that that also happened to be down at Cage Fury for the belt. Mm-hmm. I was fighting a guy who, for whatever reason, said he got sick and went to the hospital. And it was like, well, we got a call at noon on the day of the fight saying he went to the hospital last night. There's no fight tonight. And it was like,
yeah. I've never had one that close. The closest I've had was my last fight that was scheduled was 4 days out. And the promoter's always scrambling and sending you every name under the sun. And I ended up not accepting it. One of the names that he sent me because my pro debut, the guy pulled out 8 days prior. And then I took a fight that was supposed to be at 50. I moved up to 60 to fight a guy that hit like a truck. And he put me on Queer Street on the first 10 seconds of the fight. And I wasn't the same. And I was like, I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah.
Take a short notice fight just to do it. Now, did you have to do that coming up through, switch opponents last minute, do things like that?
Yeah, and actually, you never know how it's going to work out. And there's a thing like, if you turn down a fight, you're a wuss, blah blah blah. But like, whatever. This is a business, and I got to make money. I want to make money, and I want to get to the top. That I had a couple Cage Fury fights where, I mean, it was against a guy named Kyle Baker who is freaking tough as nails. But we were supposed to fight once, like I feel like in August. And he got hurt. And honest to goodness, we went through 4 or 5 opponents, and it just never ended up materializing. So that fight never happened. When I fought Rick Story, right? So this is like the plus side of taking fights or not taking fights. There was one kid that they offered that he ended up not getting cleared. So that fight didn't happen. They offered me another guy who was a stud wrestler coming down from 185. And in my mind was like, I got to take that fight. But my brother and my manager were like, it's not a smart fight, man. It's not a smart fight. And I said, but it's in Pittsburgh. Everyone's coming. I got to take this fight. Ultimately decided not to take that fight. Last minute, they say, you're fighting Rick Story. I fought Rick Story. I beat Rick Story. So it's like, you never know what's going to happen or how it's going to turn out.
No, and that's kind of the fun of fighting, even when you know who your opponent's going to be. Fighting is a lot about matchups, and I've had some favorable matchups and some matchups that weren't so favorable. And I think a lot of guys can, especially now, there's a lot of guys who can build a very good record on very favorable matchups. And I don't know if that was the case when you were fighting, but I see it happen all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely aware of it. And at the biggest thing is like ego, like being afraid that people will call you a wuss or this or that or that thing. But it's like the bottom line is if the payoff, like I fought Anthony Johnson, right? Mm-hmm. That had a huge payoff. Like the payoff would have been huge. It didn't happen, but it would have been huge. So of course you're going to take the fight.
Sure.
But if someone wants you to fight Anthony Johnson after you lose in a hole in the wall that no one's going to see and you're getting paid stupid money, then it's like, I don't know if that's the smartest decision right now. So, the matchup style, progression, or you have someone like Donald Cerrone who fights anyone, anywhere, anytime. Yeah. There's people who are more strategic about it, people who aren't strategic about it. I don't know. It's kind of a personal or a preference or a philosophy, and or a lot of that comes from your trainers and your surroundings, what they kind of suggest.
Yeah, and I think it's up to each individual. Some guys are like, yeah, I'll fight anybody anywhere, and other guys are mostly concerned with how am I going to get to that 8-0, 9-0 record, because that's going to get me to the show. It's just a different mentality, and I respect both of them. I don't if you get in the cage and fight, you're doing something.
Yeah, and by nature, I'm a conservative person.
Same.
Just how I am. Finances, my life, my whatever, security. I like to be relatively secure. So, that coupled with my brother, coupled with my manager, coupled with the people around me is how you make your decisions.
Sure. And we're on the same page there. Even when I'm mountain biking, I kind of have to weigh risk reward. I'm watching people hit these big jumps, and I'm like, oh, I'll just go around it. It's no different.
It's funny. A friend of mine, Scott Heckman, who's a very successful Pennsylvania fighter as well. I remember after I think I was done fighting, and he went skydiving, and he was like, "Man, you should come skydiving." And at that point in my life, I was like, "No, period. No, I'm not doing it. Like, it's not a risk that I want to incur at this point in my life." If someone offered me a fight now for $100,000 against I don't care who, I'd probably take it. $10,000 against a scrub? No, I'm not taking the fight. It's stupid. I'm not going to do it. So it's just whatever. It's hard to not worry about the ramifications of those decisions, but the bottom line is you just don't know what they are, and you have to make what you think is best.
Sure. Yeah, my old kickboxing coach, Zach Kelly, the first time he was in an airplane, he jumped out of it. Never flew in his life, and his first time in an airplane, he went skydiving.
Yeah.
No, that's not for me.
Yeah, especially not now.
No, so you talked a little bit about Cage Fury, right, and the CFFC, and anybody who follows, regional MMA in our area, there's a couple promotions that if you're a champion there, you have a good chance of getting the call to one of, the Bellators, the PFLs, the UFCs of the world. So when you're fighting in CFFC and you're about to fight for the belt, how close did you think you were to getting that UFC call?
I pretty much knew that that was the fight, and that was against Baker to win that belt. And it was so I fought, and then I lost 2 in a row in the UFC, and then I got released from the UFC. And then 2014 was fighting on the regional circuit. In that first fight in 2004 fights that year. First fight was Valley Fight League in Altoona. That's the one I said where I was kind of a little bit sick heading into it. And then the next 3 were Cage Fury, and that last one, when I won the belt, that was in October. And I beat Baker. I pretty much knew because my manager was, had a good relationship with UFC because, Jim and Dan Miller were there. He had a couple other fighters, that he was managing. And Joe Silva at the time, who was the matchmaker in the UFC, basically said, if you want to come back, your best bet is to go to 55. So I went to 55. I won 4 fights in a row, 3 by finish. It just made sense. Like maybe I would have had to have another fight, maybe not. But it worked out that my next fight, which I took on 14 days actually, against a guy named Beneil Dariush, who is still in the UFC now, turned out to be not a good decision on my part, but someone fell out. They needed an opponent. I took it. I ended up losing, but that got me back into the UFC. So I knew going into the title fight at Cage Fury that it's either this fight or the next fight that I get re-signed when there's an opening.
And then, you're in the UFC, you're having some success at 55. Was there a part of you as you're training, as you're fighting, being that you have that wrestling background and you're always, looking pretty much to get to the top, right? You want to be the best. Did you feel as you were fighting these 55ers that you had that chance to get to that level in the sport, in that division? Because like you said, you get to the UFC, you work all that time, and now you're surrounded by killers.
Yeah, it's really odd how my UFC career went, because at 70 I was able to beat Story, um, had some competitive fights, beat several solid guys. But at 55, I went 0-3 and got finished 3 times
Mhm.
in the UFC. And it was like, what the heck? Like, how did that happen? Because on the regional circuit, I was fighting these 55ers, having my time with them. Like
Mhm.
I finally was going into fights like this is awesome. This is awesome. I'm as big as them or bigger. I'm stronger. I can like have my way with them. This is awesome. And I mean, Baker's freaking legit. He's fought all the way up at 85. So,
Mhm.
he's a solid guy. He's a super tough fighter. And then when I got the UFC, I got choked out, knocked out, choked out. And it was like, I couldn't believe it. So when I got back to the UFC, I thought 100%, like I can legitimately get close to the top, right? I can do this. The first fight was kind of a mulligan. It was all right. I signed quick. It was like New Year's. I wasn't really training, whatever. Then I got knocked out left field against Castillo. And then
Mhm.
I went down to Brazil and got choked out by Leandro Silva. And it was literally like, what the F just happened? How and why did that happen? And looking back, whatever, it happened. But my training at that time, like, and my brother, he was really against me moving my training back to Pennsylvania. But my life got like, it was just so, I was driving everywhere out of a suitcase, hours and hours and hours and hours on the road. People canceling workouts at the last minute after I stayed in New Jersey an extra night for that workout. It just got to the point where I didn't want to do it anymore. And I thought that I could set up a training environment in Pennsylvania between I'm in Harrisburg and Philadelphia, driving back to New Jersey. It was not ideal. The people involved in that training were awesome and great, but it was not consistent enough. And 100% that played into.
And then, you're winding down, right, in your UFC career. At at what point did you make the decision, right, that I'm not going to be a fighter anymore and I need to start looking into doing what you're ultimately doing now?
It was super tough. So I got knocked out by Castillo in April. I think it was April 26th of
I was there.
14. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was terrible.
I proposed to my wife the night before.
Well, I'm glad you have a special memory of that
I'm
time.
sorry.
But like the first round was solid and I was doing solid, and I don't know what the scorecards were, but I feel like I won that round. And then he knocked me out. And that was my first time ever being knocked out cold. And I've been dropped a lot and I've been punched a lot, but never like out of it.
Mhm.
And that scared the shit out of me. Like I really legitimately scared and of my brain, of my future. And so that shook me, and I sat idle for a couple months and then trained and then fought down in Brazil, got choked out again, and was like, what the F? Like, why is this happening? And from November, I think I got released on, I think it was, if it's not the exact day, I feel like I signed to the UFC January 1st of 15 and got released from the UFC January 1st of 16. So it was like a year of just crap. And from November 8th was my last fight in the UFC, November 8th of 14. November, December, it was, I'm probably getting fired. When's it going to happen? And then the first, I don't know, half of that year, 3/4 of that year was kind of building a business life post fighting, kind of keeping my feet wet in shape, trying to still get fights. And the offers for still getting fights in that, like first half of 15, they were just so bad. They were embarrassing offers, like $1,000 to fight, $1,000 to win.
Mhm.
And granted, I wasn't the best UFC fighter ever, but I had 11 fights in the UFC. And if all you can offer me is $1,500, $2,000, it's not worth it at all. And so that 6 to 8 months, like in 2016, it was super stressful with my wife, with my drive into Philadelphia. And that was when Felder was starting to pick up steam, Paul Felder. And so I was trained with, him in Philadelphia and balanced jiu-jitsu in Philadelphia. And it just got to the point where like I just started gradually thinking it's not worth the squeeze anymore. And that was probably the second half of 16. And by that time I had started exploring speaking and had written a book. And, you know, it just was a gradual, my desire to do it just gradually waned in 2016.
And, you know, you wrote that first book, you released that book, and, you know, start your speaking engagements. How did you go about booking them? How did you find your niche, who you wanted to speak to? You know, where did that all come from you?
Yeah. And this is like whenever you initially reached out to me or I saw you post something about me, like, this is an interest of mine. I don't know if there's enough interest on the other end, but like post fighting life, like you could be a mediocre fighter in a super successful post fighting life, or you could be the best fighter in the world and a dud of a post fighting life. So it's about like balancing all that stuff together. And I'm interested in talking about that and like sharing and what can you do? And I'm not rich. Like I'm not super successful yet, but I'm making an income doing the things that I love to do. And it became, I had enough of a story, enough exposure to write a book and garner at least some local interest. Going back to your question about you go out and shake hands with the crowd, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been doing that my whole life. So there was enough interest. And I wanted to write the book for my following back home. Also with the awareness of if I speak at an event, people can read my book. Like it just made sense. So I was in education. I was a teacher. So I just started reaching out to teachers, administrators. They bring in assemblies. Kids need, you know, role models and direction and positive choices. And so I just zeroed in on that. And most of my speaking is in schools with students because I'm most passionate about helping young kids. I remember very clearly what it's like to be a young kid and afraid and scared of everything. And then podcasting started, I think it was August of 2016. And those two things kind of married. Well, speaking, writing, and podcasting are all kind of married to, you know, put out a message of hard work and discipline, commitment, perseverance. And I've really just been putting it together. And still, I mean, I was talking to you earlier, it's 2020. Speaking was going really well. And now no one's having speaking engagements. So it's just another, you know, thing I got to work out and am doing it and refocusing my efforts on interacting with my show audience more. So it's, you know, I'll never just make it. I can never just sit and count my money. Right. So
Yeah.
I'm just keeping going.
Yeah. I mean, you said something and you probably don't even realize that you said it, that in my opinion sums up your entire mentality, which is, you know, I'm not super rich yet, which means, you know, you're not stopping anytime soon. You know, even
Yeah.
I feel like if you get to a point where you would be super rich, you would just keep going.
Keep going. Like the only thing one of my biggest drivers, I watch people, some people want to be famous for egotistical reasons or wealthy. I watch successful people do good for less successful people. And that drives the shit out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a win-win. Like when you can make other people feel good, that makes you feel incredibly good. So it's like a win-win happiness. And I work so hard to hopefully put myself in a position where I can do that for loads and loads of people. I'm able to do that for a certain number of people now, but it's not like I'll say, okay, I've impacted X people, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's like, what can you do next? What can you do next? Who can you beat next? What thing can you do next?
Yeah, you remind me a lot of, I was just listening to Mark Cuban on How I Built This, and they asked him, what happens if tomorrow you lose it all, right? You don't have anything left. He goes, I'd go back to bartending. I'd work in sales for a tech startup, and I would be a millionaire within 3 years. He goes, I will win. I'll always win.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. You're the second person that's compared me to Mark Cuban, and it's like, I'll take that in a heartbeat. The other guy was an author, Scott Adams, who created the cartoon Dilbert.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and he said a similar thing on our podcast episode. But I mean, I'll take it. So in Phil Knight, who created Nike, his book Shoe Dog is an awesome book. And my show is 80% based on I read books and I talk about the books. That's the basis of my show. And he said in that book that the best advice he ever got or would give anyone is to just keep going, don't stop. And it's like, we're talking about Rocky, we're talking about whatever. You just get up, keep going. And that is in essence what fighting is. So it's just applying that to everyday life.
Sure. And, a good friend of mine that I ride bike with, we always talk about, there's people that have a certain factor, the HTFU, which is just the ability to harden the fuck up and keep going.
Yeah.
And it's something that, we kind of live by. You just, when you're riding bike, you keep pedaling. When you're fighting, third round and you're getting beat up, but it's 1-1 on the scorecard. Do you have that in you to keep going? And I think having that in sport a lot of times translates to business or whatever you want to go into, post sport. I think doing those individual sports or team sports where you have to have that mental toughness, it only sharpens you for later in life.
Yeah. And I mean, you'll win a fight if you keep coming at someone, unless they knock you. And trust me, it's happened to me several times. Unless they knock you out, unless they choke you out, unless the ref stops in. Like, if you keep coming back, eventually they're going to get to a point, if they don't stop you, where they're like, F this, I'm not doing it. And it's the, I'm drawn to Rocky a lot, but the scene where him and his wife are on the stairs in Rocky 4, he says to beat me, he's going to have to kill me. And to kill me, he's got to be willing to die himself. And I don't know if he's willing to do that. It's like, that's it, man. Like, that's freaking Rocky Balboa, but that's the secret kind of recipe to anything you're doing.
It is. And you just got to keep working at it. And, Chael said it in one of his recent podcasts. If you can weaponize pace, you become a very scary fighter. And it's no different than in business. If you can weaponize pace in business, you become a very dangerous business.
Yeah, 100%. That's what's made Frankie great. People just can't, unless they stop him.
Yeah.
They can't match it. Yeah.
So, we got to kind of where you're at now in your life, in your career. What's next for the Spaniard?
Like I said, right now, my show, The Spaniard Show, is the driver of everything I do. It's both my own self-development improvement, but it's also part business development. So everything's hosted on The Spaniard Show. And by way of The Spaniard Show, or the message of pursuit and discipline learning and getting back up, et cetera, speaking in schools and businesses, writing books. I have 2 books out now, continuing to grow the show. I'm developing some online learning or e-learning sources. I'm just created a 10 video series of overcoming fear. And I'm actually experimenting with a training program, strength and conditioning program. Very simple, meaning I email out a PDF of my workouts with audio explaining the workouts. And it's based off of the strength and conditioning I did while fighting. And the value to that of regular humans, non-civilians, is there's a certain confidence you walk with when you're like a trained fighter. And half of that is, or a portion of that is strength and conditioning. And while I don't train fighting anymore, I do train that side of it. And it's just a solid way to set your mind and body right. And I'm actually this month, May, starting on Monday, I'm doing a beta version of that to see if there's any legs for it. So those are all of the things. And that is my website is charliespaniard.com. /training is information for that. And then I've been running, like I said, I've been doing so much the last 2 months. I'm running student sessions, Zoom sessions, Tuesdays and Thursdays for kids, middle school and high school kids who feel lost, alone, need a positive message or encouragement. And that's another thing I'm really excited about.
Awesome, man. I'm really excited for what's to come for you in the future. I think you're just getting started.
I appreciate it, dude. And I won't stop. So I'll either succeed or die.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You and me both, man. It was a pleasure, getting to speak with you today. I want to, be able to get this up on Instagram Live. We're about an hour in. If possible, we could sit down at some other time. Would love to talk to you about that whole world of post-fight life and how to be successful after fighting. I think it's a conversation for another time.
Yeah, man, I would love to. And there's a lot of people have said to me, why don't you help like fighters? Like, why don't you help? And I'm 1,000,000% interested in doing it. And I absolutely. So yes, I'm committed to that. You tell me when.
Awesome. Sounds great, Charlie. It was a pleasure. Like I said, I'll be in touch, keep on keeping on, keep moving forward, and looking forward to see what you do next.
Thanks, John.
Awesome. Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Bye.